Hello, and welcome to the Ascendant Art Podcast, where we are on a search for art that is ascending above the mainstream. This is Mike with Catalytic Comics, here with co-host Joey from Keeper's Cairn and Vinny from Little Chad. Hello, guys.
Hello.
Hello.
And tonight, it is going to be a fun night, and it's going to be a funny night because we have the esteemed comedian Chrissie Mayr here with us. How are you doing, Chrissie?
Hello. Good to be here. Thank you for putting pressure on me at the beginning.
I was about to say that's terrible because comedians go on shows. I used to listen to Opie and Anthony all the time.
You're a comedian. Say something funny. Entertain me.
Yeah.
Dance for us.
And they would always have the comedians on, and it was a really valid point. Comedians would go on their local radio shows when they're selling tickets for their gigs in the town, and the morning zoo people would be like, "Hey, it's 6 a.m. Be funny." And it's just like, that's not fair to us.
If you really want that, the best way to do that is like, hey, I really want to showcase some of your skills or something like that, or get people to laugh. What is a way that I can best set you up for one of your bits? Or like, is there a bit of yours that you can do on this horrific morning radio show? And if so, how can I best set you up to do that? Just so people can get, like, I don't know, a flavor. But
being a fan of Chrissie, I can tell you the best way to set her up is to put her in a chair and tell her to try to sit in it.
Yeah, I'm not great with chairs, but I did get a new one. This one has a back and everything and armrests. So
there's
okay.
if people
that
do
could just be more points of failure, though. Let's be honest here.
That's right. But in this case, instead of set up, of course, like, right, my job as the main host is to not know what's going on and to screw it up, so that way I can be the butt of the joke.
Oh.
The straight man, the uninformed person.
Lack of information is very much my specialty on this show.
Okay, good.
Yeah, but I guess I do have a few questions though, because I know, of course, you and Vinny know each other. Of course, we saw little Christie on the Little Chad comic, but I'm kind of curious. So I guess
God, I love her.
It's amazing.
The newest one we're setting up little Chrissie to throw down.
With Aunt Karen.
Yeah.
I think she's going to initiate the Karen redemption arc. That's what I think is going to happen.
Okay, or we're going to take her down for good.
No. It's going to be fun because Aunt Karen is trying to force her way onto Chrissie's turf. Chrissie's going to make it very awkward. I mean, who knows what happens when you're on someone's podcast and they can just ask you questions on the spot.
Oh, right. She'll make her look bad just by letting her talk.
Exactly.
I want to see the episode down the line where Karen's reading through the comments. That's what I want to see.
Yes.
Oh, I mean, we all know super chats can do damage.
Yes.
We do know that. Yes, we do. That was the big lesson of 2021, I think.
Yes, it was.
Coming in right at the end to set us up for the new year.
Oh, yeah. One final lesson.
It's going to be fun. I think I've talked to people have asked me because I put Chrissie as the inspiration for this character, and it was kind of why. And so I think it's a fun thing to kind of bring up now, since a lot of people do ask, and if they listen, they may not have heard this before because we haven't talked about it on the podcast. I needed a good character to try to be a foil specifically for Aunt Karen. And
do you know that this was my favorite Christmas present this year? My boyfriend framed the very first comic strip that little Chrissie was featured in. And this is like so meaningful. I opened this and I started crying. I was like, because this was like such a cool thing for me. And he like blew it up, got it framed. So I'm going to hang this up eventually.
That's nice.
That's impressive.
Then we worked with Chrissie to get the art for her comedy album, which is available for pre-order now.
Oh my God, of course. How could I forget? Yeah, my album Live from January 6th, which is available for pre-order now on iTunes and Amazon. It drops March 15th. And yeah, Vinny here. Once I got a whiff of your style, I had been in my head thinking like, what would be good art? And I was like, it was really like so perfect and meant to be, because I was like, I would love like a wholesome depiction of January 6th, like just something the exact opposite of what the media has been telling us that it was like, instead of, something other than like the total, I was going to say bloodbath. There was like no blood. I mean, other than, from one
shit show person. Is the word you're looking for.
So yeah,
we're past 1 minute.
Describes it as a shit show, and it really, for like thousands of people, it really wasn't. It was like very calm and chill, which is something I've got in trouble for saying, that January 6th was chill. But for many people, it was, depending on
Yeah, I
what side of
think
the building you were on.
they said you were a Russian plant with disinformation,
Oh,
trying
God.
to like pretend that the insurrection didn't
It was
happen.
not, yeah, it was not an insurrection. I was like, I really want something with like people smiling, holding flags with their kids, with their dogs. And Vinny like just drew up exactly what I was envisioning.
Can I say it was funny? I was listening to I think Drunk 3PO's YouTube, and I think I did a super chat, and you were explaining to Jay like what Little Chad was, and you're like, it's wholesome, it's this, and then he was like, wholesome's not really your brand, Christie. And you were like, I can be wholesome.
Yeah, I can be wholesome, damn it. True.
Yeah, so, but what's interesting is getting back to where Little Christie came from. When you've got a character like Little Chad, who's a good-natured, good-hearted little kid, he's not going to be able to say some of the things that might be funnier and more appropriate to Aunt Karen.
How old is Little Chad?
Innocent.
Yeah,
he is very innocent, and that's what's great about kids is like they say the true thing and they say what's on their mind. They're not like always worried about hurting people's feelings like adults are. So Little Christie is what, 10?
Little Christie's is supposed to be 10, and Little Chad's about 7, and that's because my son is, when I started the strip, is 6 turning 7, and
so is he inspired? Is he inspiring Little Chad?
He is. And one thing is funny, because I got people who are like, I've noticed Little Chad never like uses contractions. He just always speaks more. And they're like, that's not normal. That doesn't seem like kid talk. And I was like, that's exactly how my kid talks. I'm taking his mannerisms.
That's cute.
So Little Christie is going to be one of the more fun characters going forward for some of the times where I want Aunt Karen to have more confrontational elements.
That's great.
And people have noticed I tend to make sure, because Little Chad, Aunt Karen's his aunt. He's going to have love for her. He's going to appreciate her on a human level.
Right.
So
sympathy,
I don't want
lets her live in their house.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So what you're saying, Vinny, is it's not like this most recent, was it the Kamala Khan Miss Marvel, where like, hey, I can just take a character and I can just make them say whatever I want. I can make a teenager who's under 18 give entire lectures about voting to 60-year-olds. Like you're saying you can't just do that in a comic?
I mean, you could, but it wouldn't be very good characterization. I mean, being honest is being truthful. I mean, that's something, and that's one of the things I really love about Christie's comedy, right? It's honest, and that's hard to find in comedy right now. I mean, Dave Chappelle is honest, and they try to cancel him, So, I mean, comedy comes from a place of mocking honestly what you see in the world. At least that's what I've always thought about it. And so when you find comedians that are still doing that, I first saw Chrissie on YouTube, which is where I found her content. And then she started joining some other shows like Friday Night Tights and doing other things. But I think it was on Friday Night Tights, and it was just a joke where they were saying it was one of the I think it was a Miss Marvel writer, one of the Muslim ones, and and you said that sounds like something you yell on a plane before you try to like.
So they're talking about the name of this writer, and I don't really have a ton of like knowledge of. I mean, I've seen like all the recent like superhero movies, like Avengers. I'm up on all that stuff, but I don't have like the years of comic book knowledge that these guys have. And then they just mentioned this name, Basha K. Ali, and I was like, that sounds like something you yell out before you blow up a plane. And it's just like the true thing. That's how it sounds. And like, I think I've trained myself to just like not, when you have an impulse, like don't censor yourself. Even if it bombs, like if that bombed, I would look at worst, you look a little racist, but at best it cracks everybody up. So it's just being willing to like take a lot of little risks.
Now, is that part of like trying to deal with hecklers in an audience, like being able to immediately just let out a response like that?
In my experience, I don't really get very many hecklers because like when you're a comedian, like whether you're a host or you're just doing a spot or you're headlining, you're in complete control the whole time you're on stage. So it's getting to the point where you have somebody heckling you that then you've like lost control at some point earlier on in the set. Like you have to let it be known if someone's drunk and yelling out, like you got to like curtail that right away, and if it comes to it, like get that person like removed. But for me, I haven't had very many hecklers. Like if anything, I do a ton of crowd work, and I might have a person who just like they talk too much and they forget there's like a whole audience here, and it's not just like me and them, getting to know each other. But then you have to be like, all right, let's move along, or you think of ways to solve just about like any problem you could have on stage. But like I've heard some horror stories, like shoes been thrown at people getting on stage trying to fight them. That usually happens with male comics. There's a guy like jumps on stage, tries to fight them out of nowhere. But yeah, again, it's like sussing out, all right, who's drunk, who's mouthy, are they going to be a problem? And it's like, can you play with them? Can you have fun? Can you make fun of them? Can you make fun with them? Like the best case scenario is like you have a drunk person and you're able to make fun of them like to their face. The whole crowd hears it and laughs and they have no clue what's going on because they're that drunk. That's the ideal scenario, but that's very rare. So I think with any kind of like heckle or interruption, you know, you should be able to deal with. That's the real test, I think, of a good comic is like how well can you improvise to each particular crowd.
I was gonna say it's been years since I did this in college, but I was part of like Georgia Tech's improv comedy club. When you mentioned
college improv,
yes.
Ah!
When I did want to ask at one point if like how you got started with this too, but are there any things that you do specifically to like practice improvisation, or is it just after you do it for a while it just comes to you? Like how does that work?
It's hard to know because I did it for 5 years before I ever did stand up. I interned at Late Night with Conan. That's when I realized I didn't want to be a news reporter. I wanted to be in comedy in some capacity. I wasn't sure how. And I thought I really wanted to be a PA. That did not come through. I knew I was interested in comedy. The writers at Conan were saying, do improv, do improv. So I joined as soon as I graduated, did that 5 years. I feel like it gave me a lot of good, like what you would call, I guess, transferable skills. And I guess I am still keeping them up because I find a really good set is a perfect blend of material and improvisation because you want to personalize it for that group of people in front of you. Like why are they leaving their houses? You know, there's so much competition for entertainment now just with streaming services alone. I mean, that's why like movies are sort of tanking right now. But the fact that a group of people have left their homes and are live in a room to see you, it's a huge compliment. And it's like you better make it worth their while. You better bring it 100%. Like, don't you dare perform drunk or too high or too whatever to remember your stuff. And you better personalize it for these people because you might be the only impression of stand-up that these people have. And if they don't have a great time because of me, I'm going to feel responsible. They may not come back to this comedy club. They may not check out stand-up again. They may not want to watch me again. So I just feel like each performance, you really have to give it your all. And for me, that's going to definitely include improv because that's how you make it special for people.
So that kind of reminds me, there's an old story. It was Walt Disney when he opened Disney World or Disneyland, the first one. And he was talking to the employees about why it was important to like keep it clean, to do everything perfect and not just slack off. And you even talking to the, like making sure there was never any trash on the ground anywhere. And when someone asked him about it, he's like, there's always going to be someone walking through the gates that day that this is their first time and possibly only time coming to this park. You know, it's got to be perfect because this is possibly the only time we're going to give them this experience. And I think sometimes people, you know, at least nowadays, don't think like that, right? Whether, you know, you take for granted that someone's just, you know, watching you as a comedian, right? It's refreshing to hear that that's kind of the attitude that you have, because you never, I've only gone to a few comedy shows. It's not something that I do often, right? It's usually, a lot of people don't always go. If you're not living in New York City or one of the cities with a big club, as you know, scene, it's kind of a big to-do. Like I live in Northern Virginia and we go to DC is where the comedy clubs that usually get good comedians are. And so it's a to-do to kind of do that.
Well, I mean, we don't even really get them in DC anymore because most comedians steer clear of this area or they're of a certain political persuasion that isn't going to entertain me.
Sorry, my dog is eating a tampon. I don't know where she got that from. Don't worry, it was not used. It's in the wrapper still. I just was like, they like to chew on things, but that's not good.
But I was going to say, Joey, when you mentioned guys of a certain persuasion, for some reason, I'm also thinking about Tim Pool and he talks about Jimmy Kimmel. And it was just like, for years, it was just the show of like, say, isn't the Orange Man bad? And this was supposed to be funny.
Yeah.
Well, they stopped taking risks and they stopped telling the truth.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Like, a comedian is essentially the fool. We've discussed this before on the podcast, but the comedian is the fool. And the fool is the most important person in the king's court because he's the one who tells the king the truth. And if you do not respect that about the comedian, you have lost the truth because everybody else in the court is going to tell you what you want to hear.
Yeah. And because comedy is like, well, mainstream comedy is much like mainstream news, very leftist. A tactic of the left is kind of they want to kind of evaporate reality, right? They lie to us all the time. They gaslight us into thinking what we're seeing and experiencing every day isn't real, and that we're wrong, and that if we question something that's going on, we're slapped with a racist, or you're a white supremacist, or you're an anti-vaxxer. So it's like, not only we can't ask questions, we can't be curious about the world around us, we have to accept the narrative that we're given. I think that's a really interesting opportunity that comedians have. It's like, it is a way you can kind of expose the truth, or at least attempt to find truth, is through humor, because it's not as direct, and you can get people to think in a way that, if you do it right, like, maybe in some ways you are not as easy to censor, because like, I think Ryan Long has done this pretty beautifully. I don't know if he's been censored. He's not very outright about his beliefs. He does a good job at like making sketches that are a good commentary about society, but that gets you to think. Like, his most viral one was like, woke people and racists are the same.
Yep.
And I mean, I feel like just about everyone's seen that at this point. And it's like, oh, white people should have their own separate bathrooms. Yes, definitely. And you're like, that's what's great about comedy. It can make you think.
I just wonder who in the modern, you think of somebody like Lenny Bruce and how much of an icon for comedians he was. He helped break down the door to really modern stand-up comedy and what you were allowed to do. And who would do that nowadays? Like, now, if somebody like, was trying to do what Lenny Bruce was doing, the other comedians, instead of trying to come out and support him, would be like trying to cancel him.
Well, a bunch of the comedians are getting bought and paid for. And going back to what Chrissie was saying about the mainstream media, it's worse than that. They have the arrogance to believe that they can fabricate our reality. They truly think, they know they're fabricating reality, and they truly think that they can spoon feed that shit to the masses, and they will believe whatever they are told. And yet, unfortunately, some of them will.
And yet, at the same time, it's just like we keep saying on this podcast, beautiful art is true. And at some point, like, you can see the untruth in it. And because of that, like, the minute they get exposed to anything that's true, like, it immediately collapses.
You're not going to have Lenny Bruce's for several different reasons. Like, the average set you see on a late night talk show, that set has been gone over so many times, combed over by so many different people. You've been tested it out many different nights. You'd actually have to type up all the words, hand it to somebody. You know what I mean? It's been really sifted through. So that leaves out very little chance for you to do what? Have a funny moment, improvise, write something with the crowd, which I can understand, because if you're a person watching TV, you're not going to see the guy with the pink shirt in the front row, right? But it also gives them a chance, like, oh, you're not going to say anything that's, outside of the narrative, and everything's kind of pre-approved down to like the words that you use. Like, I remember I had a job like working on the show Punchline, and like, I just wanted to write a joke that used the word Viagra, and even though it was Fox, it's like we couldn't say the word Viagra. And I think it's worse with these like the late night comedy shows, because it's just, they are really checking everything you're saying. They can reject certain jokes. Like, it takes comics months and months from the time they're like in the running to do it, from when they're actually like taping their set. So that's like number one. There's very little like risk involved, and right, anything outside the narrative is not going to make it through. And also, what most comics are motivated now is not speaking the truth, like not like Carlin, right? Not like Lenny Bruce. It's basically like, it's the selfish reasons. It's like, how do I get famous? How do I blow up? How do I get the big following? How do I get to quit my barista job? How do I get to quit my waiting job? Like, what do I have to do to get famous?
They're literally selling out.
Well, yeah, I mean, don't so many people at certain points in their jobs, like, you get good at anything, and there's lots of people who are very good dentists that always wanted to be in a band, but they just made really good money being dentists, so they never took a risk and tried to start that band. So I can understand it to a degree, but I think if the censorship weren't so bad of like comics on the right or on the center or libertarians, like, it wouldn't be as icky. But now it's like all you see on mainstream like late night comedy shows are leftist comics, basically.
So I really just want to jump in and say I 100% agree about maintaining your authenticity, your integrity, and if anybody wants to sponsor the Ascendant Art podcast, I will 100% sell out and completely compromise my integrity and authenticity.
Shadow Legends. Millions. Yeah.
Well, look at Rogan. Like a lot of people think he sold out. Like, yeah, he made bank, which isn't that like a lot of people would be lying if they saying like if Spotify offered you guys $100 million, you'd think about it, you know. So that's
Think about
I
it.
think
It's
he's
done.
doing
Deal's
it.
done.
It's a good.
Yeah,
I
at that
think
point,
he does
that's
a good
fuck you
job
money. Like, no matter what goes wrong, he's set for life at this point. I don't see why he wouldn't.
And so that's like the challenge is like getting more successful, reaching your goals, but not compromising your message, your authenticity, and I guess not getting crusty. And that's what we see happening with like these like women on The View and like Howard Stern and like anybody who was Neil Diamond, right? Anybody who was like, oh, I'm pulling my shit from Spotify. It's like you got crusty. It's like you're following the narrative.
I think
like,
you meant Neil Young because
Neil Young.
Neil
What did I
Diamond
say?
is an
Neil Diamond?
American treasure.
Oh,
And we don't-
okay.
Yeah.
and we won't
But-
disparage.
I don't listen to
Neil
him
Young.
either.
What's funny about Neil Young is if you guys remember the song Sweet Home Alabama by Leonard Skinner, he was selling out all the way back then, right?
No. That was the first diss track. That was Leonard Skinner making fun of Neil Young for trying to mock Leonard Skinner. So
Yeah, because I heard Neil Young sing about her.
Though, right?
yeah.
Like
Heard
Joe
Neil
Rogan
put her
going to
down.
podcast or going to what was it, Spotify? Is that where Joe Rogan went?
Yeah.
As far as that goes, like, I don't really see that as selling out. Yes, he has had to make some concessions, but he is still very authentic. He's not changed his attitude. He's not suddenly picked up new narratives that he's pushing. So,
Right.
I mean, there's selling out, and then there's kind of compromising to get your message out there, which, you know, Tim Pool, he tap dances on that line, it seems like every day, but I get it. You want to get your message out there, and if you don't make some concessions, you're not gonna be able to build a platform.
Well, that's kind of a good segue into where one of the places Chrissy works now, because you have a show on Compound Media, which is owned by Anthony Cumia, who of Opie and Anthony fame. He was one of the first proto cancellations, if you want to. I mean,
he was one of the OG to be canceled. Yeah, him, Gavin McGinnis.
So the Anthony Cumia story, he was on Opie and Anthony on Sirius XM. That was after the first time they had gotten canceled when they did the Sex for Sam bit in New York, which that one was a show. And but the reason he got canceled was he got into an argument with a woman in Times Square, and
oh yeah,
she was a certain type of person, and he.
That's a great way to put it. And
Anthony Cumia pointed out some of that, and he gets canceled.
I think he tried. He just was like taking photos of people. Yeah. It was like late at night, Times Square. Like it's something I think a lot of people who live in New York do. You're just kind of always taking photos because it's like a beautiful city sometimes at night. You know, if there's lights or after the rain or whatever. I think that was the situation. It just rained and he was just taking photos. And this woman happened to like walk into his frame and she like got in his face about it. I think they fought or she attacked him.
I think she tried to grab the camera and he tried to take it back. I mean, whatever the reason, it was overblown and it was ridiculous. And as a fan, I was unhappy that I canceled my subscription because I only kept Sirius for Opie and Anthony. And so he went and started his own media company where he was making his own content. I can't remember whether that was after Joe Rogan had kind of gotten really famous. So Joe Rogan's podcast actually evolved out of Opie and Anthony.
He was inspired by him. Yeah.
Because he would come on the show and spend 3-4 hours just talking, and it was kind of like the first precursor. A lot of comedians' podcasts kind of came out of Opie and Anthony. So Anthony Cumia starts Compound Media, and then he wants to grow it. So he starts getting other creators in to do their own show. And Chrissy has a show on there. What's that one?
It's called The Wet Spot. It's Mondays at 7 p.m. Eastern. And we have like comedians on, adult film stars, like TV personalities, whoever. And it's kind of just like fun. Like sometimes we answer sex, dating, relationship questions from callers. I mean, we have a motor bunny. Sometimes we'll throw an adult film star or whoever on the motor bunny and like see what happens. It's like a vibrating saddle, if you're wondering. Yeah, really, it's just like a lot of my friends that I've made over 10 years or so of doing comedy. But I did sort of want it to feel like old school Howard Stern, where we would do some wacky in studio segments, like my friend Peyton. We would do like anal ring toss with her. We had a dominatrix bring in like one of her slaves. Like, I don't know. We have fun. We have a lot of fun guests. But literally yesterday, this past Monday, a random girl wandered into the studio while my show was live, and she robbed a bunch of us, like stole money out of my purse, out of my wallet, out of my friend Lindsay's coat pocket, her wallet. Like, this girl made off, and they checked. It's funny because today on Kumia's show, he's watching through the security footage, and we can see the moment that she's like rifling through my shit. I was like, I felt so, I don't think I've been like burgled before, so I felt so like it's an icky feeling, and I didn't even know until like a couple hours ago. Like, I didn't think to like, it was one of these days where I was just home all day and I didn't open my wallet or anything. And
so no fraud alerts on the credit cards coming
no, and I got a text from one of the booth boys, like, oh, we had an intruder, like, oh shit. And I texted my guests, and I didn't think, and I opened my own wallet. I'm like, oh my God, all my money is gone. Literally, this bitch left me $2. And she took one of my credit cards.
That was nice.
You know, Subway fare.
I was like, wow. And that was one of the charges. She tried to use it on the subway, and she tried to spend like $400 or $500 with Dwayne Reed. So, and what I've realized,
Dwayne Reed is like the CVS of New York City, right?
Well, here's the thing is, like, because of her skin color, she could have easily walked in, stole whatever the fuck she wanted, walked out. Nobody would have stopped her. This is New York City.
And but to be fair, she's already established that she's very comfortable walking into places and just leaving with stuff.
Very comfortable. Yeah. So what we think happened is she tried to buy like a gift card. What's it called? Like a green dot card. It's basically, or I don't know if it's a Visa gift card, but it's untraceable. That way you spend your $500 up top, and that way you can make the rest of the purchases however you want, and they're not going to trace it, and you can
get it, so that way you don't have to tie much to the card. Right.
And the credit card company is not going to shut it down.
You can convert as much of that value to something else as possible before the owner of the card locks it out.
Right.
Given my vast experience with burner phones and prepaid gift cards, I can tell you that's exactly what she was doing.
Wow.
It's a basic form of money laundering.
I mean, that's how I came, that's how I produced Little Chad.
This girl had very expensive clothes, more expensive shit than I have. She had a very like beautiful coat on. She had these beautiful boots. I was like, I don't know. That's
part of the disguise, right?
So trusting. It's like, I feel bad for being trusting. I feel bad for being an anti-racist. I mean, it's like, you're not supposed to profile people until they rob you. And then it's like, whoops, all right.
Well, if she tries to come back again, you can be like, hold up, don't rob me. Just, can you be my personal shopper?
I'd be like, can I have my $300 back? Thanks. It's just annoying. It's like a family there, and it feels like somebody came into your house. It's like the money, you can always have more money, but like, it's just this feeling of like being invaded. It's like, ugh, it's icky.
Yeah, you feel violated to a certain extent.
I feel violated.
Yeah. Getting back to the compound meetings, you've been doing that for a little while. You have your own podcast too, which is separate from that, which is just the Chrissie Mayr podcast.
Yeah, Wet Spot was first. That came about. I pitched it in the summer of 2019, June 2019, and then it was picked up in July. And it was like such a blessing because like after my mom died August of 2018, and I just like, I needed something to fill that void, and I just started doing more podcasts and thinking like, all right, what do I want to do with my life now? And I started doing appearances on Compound Media, and I would do characters on Aaron Berg and Gino Bisconti's show, which is called In Hot Water, and I would just do like funny characters and throw a wig on and be like a deranged woman that was found in like a clothing donation bin, like just random shit. And I had a lot of fun doing that. And I noticed like, okay, well, there's no like solely female led show on this network. It's like very male subscriber base. So I just pitched like, all right, I'll cover the soft subjects. Like,
I guess it didn't do much to dissuade the male subscriber base talking about being a fan of Anthony Cumia and following what he did.
No, and it helps having the occasional porn star on, I think. Although there are a lot of people who really don't like the porn stars and want me to stop having them on. So
it's funny because I do get some people message when I created a character inspired by you, like, this doesn't fit your vibe. It was like,
really? What did people say?
Some people were like, we don't agree with the choices of some of the people that she talked. I was like,
What is their beef? You know what it is? If you don't like porn stars, if you don't watch porn, then you don't fuck with those people. Then you don't watch porn. Don't subscribe to OnlyFans. Don't cheat on your wife. Do you know what I mean? Like, you're never going to stop the adult industry. It's just too profitable.
I took Latin in high school. I saw what was on old ancient Roman pottery and everything else. Yeah. Trust me, this stuff has been around honestly, lot longer than you want to. I think it's the guys
who actually go out of the way to reach out to you, be like, can you not draw a cartoon child version of this grown woman who's pot? You know what I mean? Like, you're at that point where they're writing you to complain about me as a 10-year-old being a cartoon. And it's these guys that protest too much. They're the ones that I feel like are a sneeze away from like cheating, or they're like, they can't control themselves, or they're the ones with like the addiction.
That's kind of the thing though, right? Like, you're talking about your show. You talk about what your show is all about. Very, very kind of, I've heard of these types of shows, and I'll admit it, the porn star thing doesn't sound like my jam. That's the end of it for me. I've moved on with my life. I don't care anymore.
And I think a lot of people are prejudging it. They just think, oh, porn stars aren't people. I don't want to hear them talk. But it's like, I don't know. I think I've interviewed enough, and I'm friends with a lot of them.
It depends on what they're talking about.
Yeah, it depends on, just like anybody else. Like, not every lawyer is going to be super fun on a podcast. Like, not every comedian is good on a podcast. Not every musician is good on a podcast. So it's just like with any other job.
Here's what I'll say. I've watched over the last 30 years and 40 years of my life, celebrities be interviewed often. Most of the Hollywood people have probably done a lot similar things to the porn stars to get into the places in their career. At least the porn stars are more open about what they've been doing and getting paid to do. And so whatever. My thought on it, and I've had this argument with some people who, from a value standpoint, don't agree with it.
I was going to say I'm the resident Baptist on this channel.
Yeah. So this, it might not be safe for Baptists. That's one of the terms we coined here, not safe for Baptists. Instead of NSFW, it's NSFD.
Oh, what is not safe for Baptists?
It's basically your wet spot show would be not safe for Baptists.
Why? Because it's conversations with occasionally people.
Because they
can't even listen to these people talk. You're that thin skinned. You're that precious that you can't listen to people have a conversation.
But some
sounds
people,
that way though.
Yeah. So what I've
there we go.
When I've talked to the people who kind of feel that way, what I explained to them is like, look, if you've got somebody, and this came up, it was actually, and it was funny, Chrissy, because it came up in the context of one of the shows you did, and I was talking with someone. It was after, was it Brandy Love or whoever it was got kicked out of the that convention down in
Turning
Florida.
Point.
And you had her on your show like that night along with Candace,
yeah.
And you were talking about it. And so I was talking with someone else I know who has a more traditional value set, and he was arguing that no, she shouldn't have been. I was like, look, if somebody aligns with you 90% of your values and will be fighting with you in the trenches of the culture war, why are you going to turn them away? And they were like, well, they're the 10% we don't agree on is so fundamental. I was like, here's what you do.
Fuck your fundamental 10%. My best friends don't agree with me on every one of my opinions. We're still fucking friends.
Yeah,
Get over it.
Exactly. So this is where I got to him. I was like, look, if you really believe your values and your choices are the better way of life, wouldn't it be better to be friends with this person, not judge, judge the sin, but not the sinner, and let your values in your life be a model that would make them want to maybe make different choices, right?
That's literally what Jesus
Eventually
did.
they'll come around, unless you make them hate you along the way.
Which is what you do when you kick Brandy Love out of the convention. Like, you make a scene. And this is the other thing. And it was a younger guy. I'm like 40. So I had to explain to him, I was like, look, if you lived through the 90s for real, when the 90s were a really, really nice decade for the country. And it's when conservatism was really frowned upon as, dour and not cool. And the reason I think we lost a lot of the ground in the culture war is because of and no offense to people who may have been in it, it was the Christian right and the being labeled and lumped into that group where you were the fun police. And so when you kick Brandy Love out of your convention, you're turning into the fun police again. We should be embracing first, free speech, First Amendment, and then saying, look, I don't necessarily agree personally with the choices you're making. I'm going to live my life this way. Why don't you see if you think that maybe making these different choices might be working better for you? And then, be the example that leads them that way. And then you're not the fun police, and you can have a big tent, which is what we'll need. If you really want to turn things around, you can't make, especially young people, which is what the Turning Point people are supposed to be trying. They're trying to aim at college students. They tried to say that she was there with students, right, to try to make it sound terrible. These are college age kids. Trust me, college age kids know how to find nudity on the internet.
She wasn't trying to meet college age kids.
No, she was attending a convention.
She wasn't dressed in a bikini. She wasn't handing out business cards.
I mean, if she was, there's still technically nothing wrong with that, because they're all 18 plus in college.
And if you're going to toss out Brandy Love, are you going to toss out everyone who's ever watched porn? You know what I mean? Then are you going to toss out anybody who's ever gambled, anyone who's ever cheated? Then how many people are you left with if you're really sticking?
Yeah, because there's two thoughts. There's two thoughts that I have here, because one of them is, at least as far as talking about this incident goes, and especially when we talk about the 90s, one phrase I like to, or actually I coined for that, is the progressive right. So we know, of course, about the woke left, the progressive left. And what I call the progressive right, it was the idea of using state institutions, using the schools, we can reshape society to be as we want it to be. And what's funny is even we've had with the neocons, like entire wars built on that premise of saying, like, we're going to take a society that's A and we're going to turn it into B because we can make people be like this. And it's been a massive failure every time it's tried, right, in every context. But the other part of it too, and this is, I think, where like some interesting common ground can be had, is you're right. It's not the case that everyone agrees on everything or that everyone's going to enjoy what everyone else does. And so one of the kind of interesting things, especially if you go back to like philosophical conservatism, was the idea that we all have these different interests, different loyalties, right? Different connections in life. And the idea is you can find things people have in common. And as you kind of like put more connections out into that idea space, the more likely it is you'll have something in common with somebody. And one of the kind of really funny examples of this is in the conservative libertarian space. If you go to like Mises Institute and stuff, like these are all like super traditional looking guys. Everyone's in suits. It's very like old school academia type. But at the same time, like one of the great writers in that tradition, Murray Rothbard, like he could not get published in academic journals because no one wanted to listen to libertarianism at the time. But there was one journal, or there was one publication, I should say, that would run his articles, and that was Playboy magazine. So what's funny is like there's the running joke about, oh, I only read it for the articles. It's like, that's because actually they were running his articles, which are really good. It's funny to like see all these people in like business formal suits, but they're like, hey man, for your required reading, like you got to go back and like read all of his Playboy articles, because like that was the foundation for the whole movement. But it's because again, he was able to build these connections in places you didn't expect.
Yeah, that's true. And I feel like a lot of girls in the adult industry, it's like I don't know, I feel kind of like a kinship between, like, I think comedians and adult film stars are kind of similar in that you're seen as like degenerates by the rest of society. You're seen as sort of like tainted. You can't ever go back to the respected real working world. It's you face a lot of the same stigmas. So maybe that's why I have some empathy for them. And like, just like anybody else, they can be very fun on podcasts, and it's like, and knowing that Compound Media has such a high like male subscriber base, it's like, okay, you're also kind of like giving the people what they want.
Well, no one says these girls aren't savvy business people, especially now that there's more capability of owning your own content, so to speak, when you're in that industry. I do think there is something nice about the idea that at least from a, even though I don't agree with necessarily some of the stuff personally, but the idea that maybe now more than most times the girls are owning the money that's being made more. There was something that I think made it easier to attack, and it's still, I think, one of the more valid lines of attack against that industry is how taken advantage of the performers are compared to the monetary rewards that are coming in. So I do, from a libertarian standpoint, respect the fact that the OnlyFans type place does allow the creator themselves to at least be reaping more of the reward directly.
True. And the big studios take such a huge cut of what they make. studios will make like thousands of dollars, and a girl will make like a few $100 or $1,000 or whatever. And with OnlyFans, they just like, yeah, they're in total control of their income.
Now, I mean, I
The
think
only problem I have with it is when you hear those stories about how they'll latch on to one of their fans and, you know, start basically milking them as a sugar daddy.
There are a lot of sugar daddy, sugar baby relationships that are totally consensual. Like there's lots of men who are happy.
And
to
if they're
give people
consensual,
money.
that's fine. But we see a lot of basically scamming because.
Do you blame a bartender for making people alcoholics though?
I don't blame anyone for anything all by themselves. Like, it takes two to tango in those circumstances. The guy's a fucking idiot too. But neither of them is doing right. Neither of them is doing a good job. And that's when it becomes a problem. But
don't you think there's a certain,
happily paying you
but that's the thing, like there's got to be some responsibility if you're the consumer, right? Like when I send a super chat, I'm choosing to send the super chat, right? And that's the YouTube model. So that's what I don't know about, you know, how it works in some of more of the
right. I'm talking more
one.
the circumstances where they start to develop the personal relationship with a fan.
So isn't that really
the fan that they love them and they want to come meet them, but they need the fan to send them $500 for a plane ticket?
But isn't it the fan's responsibility to try to like you?
Yes, I'm not saying either of them is completely indemnified of responsibility in this. I'm just saying you're an idiot for buying this, and you're kind of a piece of shit for leading him on.
Well, I mean,
both people are stupid.
At worst,
but that can't be consensual. Yeah, I mean, like there's shades of gray in there where like a man could enjoy. You know what I mean? Think about a guy who's like, and a lot of these guys call into my show, so I understand their point of view. Like maybe they just got a divorce, or they're literally heartbroken, or they gained a lot of weight. They don't have the confidence to go out and meet real women, or they're so burned, they're just so afraid of rejection. I understand like subscribing to a girl on OnlyFans and chatting that way. It's like, I understand, because in my opinion too, I think that it could be like a band-aid. It feels good in the moment, but is that going to help you towards meeting someone to be a partner, to be like your ride or die, someone to be there, like hold your hand when you're in the hospital? No. And I totally see your point where like, if you can't control yourself, you can waste so much time on someone who's never going to be your partner. But I also understand the guy who's not ready to get out there and meet women yet, but they do want to feel a little bit of a connection. It's like a little bit of like, all right, I feel like I have someone to focus on, send money to, someone to jerk off to, right? And it's like low stakes. Just like if a woman gets her heart broken and she doesn't want to like date another man again or get serious again, it's low stakes. Like she'll probably go out and have one night stands, as guys can too, but it's the easy thing to do before you're ready to start another relationship. But I agree that there are, of course, you can be easily taken advantage of. Like, and again, just like a bartender, and I'll make the reverse argument, a bartender can cut you off when you've had too much. I mean, our OnlyFans girl's going to cut a guy off before he sends you his last mortgage payment. Like, I think that fucking sucks. You know what I mean? Like, is your bank going to cut you off?
No, but if the girl starts pushing the guy to do exactly that, that's when we have a problem.
And right. And
kind of like
You
Scientology.
have to be an adult and be like, oh, I really, but just like people do it with gambling too. They spend money they don't have on gambling. People spend money they don't have on women.
Well, they're all addictions, even porn.
Totally.
So what we should be doing is, just like since every other commercial on television now is for sports betting, they always put in the, if you have a problem, call this number. We need a simping helpline.
Oh,
there really should be.
There should be. That should be. You know what? That should be our business.
Also, if this is how you feel,
we should make
then we should shut down all strip clubs too, because there are guys who.
No, Chrissy, I just came up with a new business line. We need to be out there with our simping helpline to get business.
But guys, I think some simps don't want to admit that they're simps. They don't want to be thought of as.
It can be Simps Anonymous. You know, what would be the 12 steps of Simps Anonymous? I admit that I have a problem. I admit that it's in my control. I believe in a higher power called my mortgage payment that I need to make.
Like, there's always, like, men and women have our different weaknesses, right? Like, a certain type of man can totally be taken advantage of online by women, you know, dump a bunch of money, time, right? But I feel like women can be taken advantage of, like, dump a bunch of time into a relationship and not realize like the guy is cheating on them, the guy's not really into them. So like men and women do have their weaknesses that can be exploited, in a relationship or in
so
a
this is a little old
dynamic.
school.
Relationships are just dangerous territory to begin with.
Does anybody remember Unsolved Mysteries, right? The old
Yes,
Robert
I
section?
love that show.
So
That
they would always do, it would seem like every 3 or 4 episodes there would be the lonely heart scammer who would be moving from town to town, like going to these women who were usually older and had some money, and he would just drain their bank accounts and then just leave, right? And they'd be looking for him until you got the update, he's been found. So I think that Chrissie's right. There is, for both genders, because there's two,
Because there's only two.
There's a two. There's different with the Lonely Heart scam was generally a male, a decent looking man, like scamming women and out of their money too. And now what's happened with men is, I think with the modern technology that's available, there is a much wider ability of an unethical e-thought to take advantage of massive amounts of men.
Yeah, look at the Tinder swindler. This freaking guy. They did a Netflix special about this guy who just went at, he would start dating a woman, take her on crazy expensive first couple of dates, private jet, that kind of level. He would make these women think that he was rolling in it, and then he would convince them that they needed to open up a credit card in his name in their account, and he would just drain their bank accounts. So here's an example.
He also staged a thing where his bodyguard got stabbed and he was in an ambulance and everything.
And he would send bloody photos to these women to try to get them. So it's men are out there scamming too, women are out there scamming. My sister married a scammer, so it's it happens. And she went 10 years without a good date. First guy she met after that, first good date, and she's fucking in. Because I get it. People, you get to a place where your self-esteem is below sea level, and then literally any positive attention, you're like, oh, I'm in, I'm sold. This is so much better than being alone.
Now, what I will say is that I do think that the ability for a decently attractive female to scale the grift is easier. You've got
selling bathwater.
Like selling bathwater, or
because we as guys are far more pathetic.
Yes. You guys should try selling your bathwater and just see what happens. You could sell your socks right now.
I'd rather not. Ever.
Number one,
gross.
It takes a long time. It's probably a lot of effort. You have to buy the little bottle.
Are we talking regular socks or happy socks?
What's a happy sock?
Oh, you don't want to know. It's a military term.
Socks? Okay.
That would be what
crunchy socks.
Yeah. But I would say, first of all, any baths you shower. Why would you sit in your own dirt? Why? It doesn't make sense.
I love baths
because it's relaxing as fuck. You put the Epsom salt
hot
in there,
water,
bubbles.
Epsom salt,
I'm thinking also, Vinny, it goes back to the days before the time the water was running, and you quite literally just had a bunch of hot water you poured into a tub.
I'm not an Amish person. I have running hot water. You take a shower.
You can't lay down and listen to
be completely immersed in it. That's true.
If you have sore muscles, I'm on that Epsom salt kick for sure. I have
but I agree with you, by the way, Vinny. There's our connection in common here as we're talking about making connections.
Yeah,
I prefer the shower too.
Here's another question. Why did Amish people decide 1830 was where technology had to stop? Because they didn't stop at the time.
Right. What came out in 1830 that triggered them?
Yeah, exactly. It was this is we're good with everything through here, but no further advancement is authorized. They clearly were okay with technology up to a certain point, and then said no. I would really like to learn the
what was the
secret
last straw.
Where it was oh crap, it's powered by that newfangled electricity. Is it really is it the electricity part? I don't know enough about Amish stuff to know.
That may be tied somewhere as far as automation goes, but I'd have to really dig into it. But when you mention 1830, that was the beginning of automation with coal and steam power.
Sweet, I nailed it. I totally guessed. That was just a shot in the dark.
Now, what's funny about that? Well, go a little bit different direction. One of my favorite authors is John Taylor Gatto. He wrote a whole bunch of great books about education. But one of the interesting things is that the public school system actually was a way to slow people down at the time. Because they're hey man, with all this new technology coming out, people are not going to need the big trading companies anymore because they can start producing their own stuff. So it's how can we slow people down mentally to work at the rate we want them to, but not take advantage of everything happening. And so that was the 1850s is when you started seeing the public school systems come out.
So, we homeschool our son. And one of the discussions I've had with my wife about it was like, if you look at it from a pro homeschool standpoint, the great thinkers, the great innovators of our history have all basically been privately tutored or effectively homeschooled.
Ooh.
If you go back to like public education in the last 100 years, no massive innovations coming from people in public schools.
It's because school teaches you how to think inside the box.
Exactly. Whereas somebody like even like the Bill Gates and the, you know, Steve Jobs, what are they most famous for? Dropping out of the normal institutions to do their own thing and start the computer revolution. Like they both left Ivy League type schools because that wasn't going to help them do what they wanted to do. So homeschooling is really getting back to being creative and innovative, like Isaac Newton, all these guys who created all these, you know, still fundamental, you know, science principles, you know, the science, all that came from people who were homeschooled. It wasn't institutional education teaches you to support the institutions. It doesn't teach you to create innovation.
Ooh, that's a good point.
Not to get on a soapbox there, but I am very pro homeschool. I've put out a lot of
Is it hard to do?
Not when you've got a loving wife who can, you know, dedicate the time to it. What's awesome is they can finish within a couple hours, right? They cover daily.
Oh yeah, they're done by lunch most days.
They're done by lunch, and then they can go out and do activities. And my son is more creative. Like he wants to write, you know, his little storybooks. He wants to do all this stuff. He wants to constantly be doing things. He never turns it off. And I don't think he would be anywhere near like this if he was in a public school setting where it was all very dictated. So I can see firsthand the difference in how, because he was in a preschool before the in the pre-virus of unspecified origin times, right? And it was after that
before the end of modern society.
Yeah. Before that. So it was a choice where he was in preschool and he was getting ready to transition to traditional kindergarten going through K through 12. And that's when they announced that even kindergarten in the area I'm at was going to be all day on like a tablet, like just kids in front of a screen. I was like, this is bullshit. There's no way a kid who's 6 is going to learn anything just sitting in front of a tablet, right? You know, kindergarten is all, you know, when it's effective is hands-on learning. You've got to be able to do stuff. So we sat and talked, and my wife and I decided like we're going to end up, mainly her because she's the one who was at home at the time, she's going to end up having to do all the education anyway. So we might as well just do homeschool so she can do it on her schedule. So she can come up with the curriculum. And it's been fantastic. And they're both really happy with it.
Oh, that's
and
great.
In the area we live in, the homeschool rate has jumped from like 3.5%, 4% to like over 11% of the student population.
Yeah, not everybody's getting in anymore. Like we were so happy that we were ahead of the curve on that because they were like, we're only going to be able to admit this many people into the homeschool program this year. And I was like, we got first dibs because we're already homeschooling.
Well, I mean, no, in Virginia, you're allowed to homeschool. You can do it.
But if you want to be in the program where their teachers teach your kids and you just supervise.
Yeah, so
because to be honest, like you don't have this problem yet, Vinny, because you still got a youngin'. But like, I can't do the math my daughters are doing at this point. Well, the algebra and shit. I'm like, I failed algebra twice in high school.
Well, here's the secret I have. My wife has a science degree, and she took calculus and did all this stuff. And my brother-in-law is a PhD in mathematics, so I'm pulling in the family to take care of that problem.
Oh, that's a good idea.
So you're saying, in other words, is instead of like gambling your children's future on, say, like history teachers who don't know any history, which I did run into that while doing science ed in middle school for a couple of years, you're like actually building connections with people who actually know the content. That's so radical, Vinny.
Makes sense. It's basically like you're hiring your own teachers, you know?
Yeah, you go to the subject matter experts, you know. Like I've got
science would call those the conspiracy theorists, though.
Yeah, sure. So if I wanted to have my son learn about, you know, comedy when he gets older, if he was interested in that kind of theater, I would send a message to Chrissie. I was like, hey, can you set aside some time and talk to my son? You know, he's interested in comedy. Like if my son wanted to learn about web development, I'd message Mike and be like, hey, can you help tutor him a little bit? That's what we used to do, right, as a society, because you can't do it for them, but you give them direction to people who have some information and can maybe, if they're still interested, then they want to learn more. And that drives them to want it. Instead of public schools where you drive the desire out of them, like you're just crushing their hope and love of education.
It's
just goes away.
Basically like a 9 to 5 for a kid, you know, like think about how you sit and
Well, what's
the
funny about
That's
that
what I
is
told my daughters, because they want to go back to public school, and I'm like, you realize if you go to public school, you already complain about the students that make the class take longer than it needs to with their question. If you go to public school, you are tripling the amount of time you're spending sitting there learning the same amount of material.
Exactly. And what's funny is when you mention 9 to 5 for kids, so like this is the book I keep flashing up here. This is Underground History of American Education by John Gatto.
I should send that to my sister. She's a teacher.
Yeah. Oh, that'll be a fun conversation then. So, and what's funny is
she an aligned teacher or one of the?
She's a little. Yeah.
I feel like this is Wizard of Oz. Is she a good teacher or a bad teacher?
She's a little red pilled, but she didn't want to stand up at the school board meeting and be like, this is fucking bullshit. Like when things were.
Well, what's funny is if you're from New York and she's talking like that. So John Taylor Gatto was the guy like that in the 90s. He was a very famous award-winning teacher because he was turning around kids in like the worst possible schools in New York. And what's funny is that part of it was he would actually like fake attendance records and tell kids to like skip class, but like you got to go to the food bank and feed people. Like skip class, but like let me show you how you can get in as like an extra on this film. He would do stuff like that. He'd send kids on assignments out around the cities because he's like, yeah, go do actual life things. And then at that point, you'll know what questions to ask and what you need to learn. And if you want to learn, get to the library, find people who know this stuff. And so that was his method of teaching. And it was so successful that once he admitted like that's what he was actually doing, then he got kicked out of the education system. So,
wow.
But what was interesting is part of his research, he actually found like the meeting notes where like John Rockefeller and Andrew Carnegie were talking about, because at the time, like they were putting more money into the schools than the government was. And when you mentioned a 9 to 5 for kids, like that was actually Andrew Carnegie's goal. He's like, we're going to basically like teach kids to obey the clock, obey the shift clock, do the tasks that they're assigned. So like one of the reasons that you have these like relatively short periods separated by bells, which was actually developed by the Prussians.
Interesting.
To like create workers and soldiers. Like that was actually like the intention of that system was, in addition to the subject matter, you're actually training kids.
Years. Yeah.
You are going to like talk about this topic. Now we're going to switch to this totally different topic in an hour. And like, you've got to be excited about every single thing I put in front of you, no matter what it is.
Like ruining the flow. It's like on a podcast, you learn like take a Rogan 3-hour podcast, seeing where that goes.
Yeah.
How much you learn. If someone was stopping him every 40 minutes, I mean, this is a terrible example. I mean, because he'd still
what I love
do a good job.
Yeah, I've now learned that the education system is Pavlovian training to like make kids respond to stimulus in a specific way. Now I'm even more confident in my choice to homeschool.
I know.
And think about it. Why did they make the times the way they did so that the adults working their 9 to 5s had time to drop their kids off and then go to their 9 to 5s, right? They can't start at the same time.
And then you flip around politically, and then why is it that all the really important meetings just happen to take place when everyone's at work?
Interesting. Yeah.
Because that was it was some like political activism classes I took back when I did stuff for Ron Paul's campaign. And like that's actually a lot of local governments, that's the strategy, is like that is how they keep people out of any important decision, is they just schedule it when people don't have time.
Oh, I think our county school board just said the parents weren't invited anymore. I think those meetings are happening behind closed doors now.
Wow.
Yeah, you are Loudon, so you're knee deep in the problems.
Knee deep in a bunch of bullshit.
Yes. But what's fun is, as we're talking about this, and I like the way you said it, Vinny, is this is kind of like what we want to move towards, right? Is instead of this system where it's like, we've got this, the experts got this, we're under control. It's really, we want to get back to people actively participating in every possible way and trying to both do and discover what's best.
I know. I think that if there's one positive, I can tell you that just in my zone, the amount of people like we did who are now going into homeschool and taking control of that kind of stuff has gone up like exponential, like to the point where the county I'm at in Virginia is dealing with a consequence where they've had such a tangible drop in attendance that the county is losing funding from the state based on the number of students they don't have. And they're
right. And New York City's hemorrhaging, like 2 million students left the New York public school district.
I wonder if that corresponds to how many started going into Florida school districts.
Yeah, I'm sure it's partially like people moving away, and it's probably mostly moving away and partially homeschooling.
Now, I know that you were down in Loudoun County not too long ago, but that was for a whole different event.
What do you mean?
You were in Loudoun County includes where Dulles is. Dulles Airport, Dulles Expo Center, which is
Oh yes, the topic that you guys don't like talking about. Yeah, I was at Exotica live streaming the convention.
It was funny because I saw some of your footage when you were live streaming on YouTube, and that was also the expo center where they do gun shows. And
cool.
So I was like, oh, I know where you're sitting at. That's where the table where the guy does the custom rifles is usually at.
Cool. It was a different kind of gun show for sure.
So do you that was when you were doing your podcast. How's touring going? Is it starting to pick up now? Are you getting more dates?
I'm exactly as busy as I want to be. And I booked a bunch of shows kind of leading up to and now after the release of my album. So I'm going to be in Dallas and Austin next week promoting the album, and then I'll be at Good Nights in North Carolina, March 17th, and then the Wormhole in Savannah, Georgia, March 19th. I'll be in Tampa, Florida at Side Splitters, March 20th, and then Comedians of the Compound. So it's myself, Anthony Cumia, some of the other guys from Compound Media will be in Atlantic City, April 22nd and 23rd.
Is that at a club, or are you guys in like one of the hotels?
I think it's the Claridge Hotel, and they have a theater room in that hotel. I think we've been there before.
Any shows in Virginia? Make it easier for me
I'm open
and Joey
to hearing, like, if you have any good venue suggestions where they don't ask for your papers, I'm totally down to look into it.
I know there's one in Winchester and Leesburg, both have comedy clubs.
Okay.
That are, I think, and with our new governor involved, I think they no longer are requiring the items that were required previously.
That's great. Yeah. Hopefully in New York City, we'll see. There's talk about the mandates being taken down basically in the next couple of weeks. So we'll see what happens. For me, I don't believe anything until I'm seeing it. So
we're just going to have to see how it gets spun. I guess we're just only going to hear the science has changed.
Well, as we're recording,
so we can still trust the science.
Yeah, this show is being recorded as the science is probably officially changing in Washington D.C. at a speech right now.
Well, let's be honest.
It's March 1st. Yes,
we're doing Omicron right now, and with the whole Russia thing, I'm sure Putacron is right around the corner. So,
Putacron
sounds like a concert show from like
Putacron's going to be the next variant that has to lock down the whole country for another 16 years.
I just put up for sale on my website a "Rootin' for Putin" shirt. It's just a good way to let your Facebook friends know you don't support Ukraine for whatever reason. I don't know.
Why don't we just? What was the clip from Seinfeld when Kramer was playing Risk with Newman, and they were on the subway because they wouldn't leave the board because he was worried they would be cheating. And Kramer was like, "All you've got left is Ukraine. That's nothing. Ukraine is weak." And then Ukrainian guy was like, "Ukraine not weak," and he knocks over the board. And that was my entire frame of reference for Ukraine growing up because I didn't really care. And I was a political science major, and I still didn't really care. So as of right now, I'm really sorry that people are suffering. It's terrible. I don't want to be involved in it. Not my place. Not going to. When we've got people talking about doing no-fly zones for Ukraine with NATO jets, I was like, oh, I really like Red Dawn, but I don't want to live it.
I think the whole reason that Russia started going into Ukraine in the first place was because NATO was going into Ukraine, and that was what Russia didn't want to see happen. So, I mean, both sides are being assholes, but I don't know who's to blame at this point.
I don't want to know because I just want to not be involved.
I was going to say, maybe we can get Scott Horton on the podcast sometime. Anti-War Radio.
Great. He's a great guest.
I've listened to many episodes of his. He is really a great guy.
He's so smart. I mean, he can talk. He's so knowledgeable, and he can just go on and on. It's always the people who are so smart that like
be our Art of War episode. That's
Art of War. Now, in his case, he's the Art of Peace, but yes.
So when you get to people, because your podcast you do all sorts of guests. So now we try to get people who are creating content, right? So it's kind of broad. We've had chefs all the way to comedians now. Your show pretty much has no boundaries, and you have whoever you want on.
Whoever. I kind of am attracted to people who are censored or who've been kind of like vastly misunderstood. So I like talking to like Lauren Southern or Ann Coulter. And then it's fun. You get on some, Sebastian Gorka was a fun guest. Mike Cernovich, like kind of like combination of like trending. I just had Brandon Strock on just earlier today, and he, the last time we were supposed to He was supposed to do my podcast. He was arrested that day. It was like right after January 6th. So he's had quite a last year. But yeah, it's a good range. It's a good range of guests. And then like comedian friends of mine, you know, just like whoever I'm finding like interesting, or I'm feeling like, oh, this person's extra censored. Like I've had Gavin McInnes on a bunch. And if I can in some small way help to like uncancel people on a small level, I feel good about that.
I really like Gavin McInnes. I was sad to see him canceled. And it's like, I know he's got his own stuff now, but the problem is like, I can't support everybody.
Aw, yeah, it's like
I don't have that kind of money floating around.
How many things are you to subscribe to? Yeah.
Yeah, I think I'm at like 4 now, and it's like I got mouths to feed and mortgages to pay myself. So,
yeah.
Unemployment took a hit on my support too. There was no super chats going out for a good 6-7 weeks, but
true, yeah.
So, it's awesome. Any more stuff you want to plug? You want to promote?
Definitely pre-order my album live from January 6th on Amazon and iTunes. It drops March 15th. It's about 20 minutes or so that are about like the Biden administration, poking fun at January 6th a little bit, the lockdowns, and then the rest of the jokes just from 10 years of doing stand-up, just material about myself and just my life and like kind of living in New York City. Please check that out. Yeah, check out the Chrissie Mayr podcast on iTunes, YouTube, Spotify, SoundCloud, Wet Spot on Compound Media, Mondays at 7 p.m. Also, I do an all-ladies Simpcast on Sunday nights at 9 p.m. Eastern. It's people have called it the conservative view. I don't know if that's an apt description, but yeah, fun.
I know that
space ladies.
You had that fun. What was the one that I thought that got a little out of control was when you moved off of your Simcast to Lauren Southern's.
Oh God, yeah, people are still talking about that. Yeah, it was the same crew, but plus she added on like Destiny, who's like a pedo sympathizer. I don't know.
Yeah, the minor attracted persons people. I don't. There's a lot of
tolerance
I can have.
him and Vosh, those guys. I've seen them in some.
And that Stardust chick. Yeah, it's hard to like hear them out. It's hard to see their point of view.
So there are hard lines for me in terms of my tolerance level where I do believe there's a big tent. It's great for no, that's not in my tent. Sorry. That
shouldn't be in any tent.
That should not be in any tent.
Even if you've never diddled kids, if you want to diddle kids, I think you should die.
Or if you're making an excuse for someone who is, wanting to do that.
That was exactly the argument we had. Is like if you have the desire but have never done it, what are the degrees of like what should happen? Like it was Stardust in Destiny who were like, oh no, it's all about getting them into. We have to destigmatize it so we can get these people into therapy. Like that was their main argument. And they also used the argument of, oh, if you have one drink, does it make you an alcoholic? Like they were trying to use that as the argument.
I've known several alcoholics. No, it doesn't.
I was like,
but if you diddle one kid, you're a kid diddler.
But right, that's what they're trying. That was the argument they're trying to make. So it's
good. It was good job.
And I find that people who say that are trying to justify their own actions. Like, well, I just did it once, so I'm not a pedophile. And it's like, ugh.
Yeah, we had was it Libs of TikTok exposed? There was a professor here in Virginia at Old Dominion University who was a criminology professor who was like, oh, I'm writing a book because I want to change how we talk about minor attracted persons. I was like, no, luckily.
Yeah, the people that want to do that.
So luckily within a week of like Libs of TikTok, like promoting that video.
I don't even like that term.
Professor was
I think the term should be more derogatory.
Well, that's
don't make
the
it
term
sound
they're
good.
trying. Yeah, that's what they're trying to use. So that was a really way to. I totally just derailed the plugs and the end of the podcast.
No, it was good. You're talking about the epic live stream.
But it's a great example of how Chrissie is always in the content that is entertaining. There you go. Like,
thank you.
Whether it's the Simpcast or moving to Lauren Southern's drunk cast.
Yeah, that was really fun.
There was a lot of drinking going on.
Oh, it was. She can drink, like, and still really hold it together. Yeah, she's impressive. But yeah, thank you guys so much for having me on. Check out the pods. Check out the album.
That sounds good. Well, hey guys, I guess in that case we will convene again next week. And Chrissie, thanks so much for coming on, talking to us. Always a fun learning experience.
Thanks for having me, guys.
Absolutely.
Bye.
Okay, bye.
Okay, bye.